Well, we were having a hearty discussion last week in chapter 19 and 2 Samuel. And we were discussing, Pastor, you were busy doing something, but we got talking about Joab's plea with David to get out and talk to the people while he was mourning Absalom. And we were discussing his approach in doing that, and so we had a pretty good discussion about that. So we're going to continue from there, because David now it's an interesting. This whole rest of the chapter, if you were not thoughtful, you might just read right over it, and it wouldn't seem like there's much there. But what I see, and I want to see if you see the same thing this morning, what I see here planted is the seeds of the divided kingdom coming in terms of Israel and Judah. So you tell me whether you think that's correct or not as we go forward. We're going to also have a couple examples of different individuals in how they handle the relationship with David, their expectations of him. This is really a chapter that tests David's ability, kind of politically speaking, what is politics anyway, but the effective of working with individuals and to reach a common goal. That's ideally what it should be. In fact, we've come to see it as, in America, we've come to see it as, how well can you fight the opposition? But that's not really its goal. So we're going to see some good examples here and some not so good. So let's start with around verse 13.
What chapter is this?
Chapter 19. Well, let's start with verse 12. So David's talking to Judah, to the priests of Judah, and he's trying to appeal to Judah, those of Judah who have not yet been proactive in asking David to return as the king. Israel in general, the other 10 tribes have, and so David says, and say to Amasa, which is his what? Who's Amasa? Or Amasa, however you say it. Who is that?
That's Joab's brother.
Okay, it's Amasa. Is anybody? You say it's Joab's
Paul.
Okay, let's use. Go ahead, Drew.
Wasn't he the guy who kind of, replaced Joab in Absalom? He was like the Joab of Absalom's army. He was like the general.
He was. I'm going to read it from the Eastons, for example. He's the son of Abigail, which is David's sister. Okay, he was appointed by David to command the army in the along with Joab, who afterwards, as we're going to see, is going to not like that very much. Joab's very territorial. Okay, so we're going to see what happens about that if we get that far, which is actually in chapter 20. So, which we probably won't get there today, but that's what's coming up. So David says in verse 13, "Art thou not of my bone?" Well, of course he is. This is his nephew. "And God do so to me, and more also, if thou be not captain of the host before me continually in the room of Joab." And he bowed the heart of all the men of Judah, even as the heart of one man. In other words, he was very persuasive. So that they sent this word unto the king, "Return thou and all thy servants." Now, who bowed? Who bowed? It was the representative of David that allowed this to happen, I believe, because he says he's telling from verse 11, King David sent to Zadok and to Abiathar the priest, saying, "Speak unto the elders of Judah, saying," and so these words are being relayed. So they are ambassadors for him in regards of getting the people of Judah back on board, and they were apparently persuasive in this, so they became of one mind and became willing to do so. Well, I'm going to summarize what I'm getting ready to read, so we understand what we're looking for here. With those of his own closest tribe, David is of the tribe of Judah, right? Now, when we talk about the 10 tribes and the 2 tribes, what were the 2 tribes? Who were the 2 tribes that we'll see going forward? Who are the 2?
Benjamin and Judah.
Benjamin and Judah. I want you to remember that, okay? So as we move forward with the text, so Judah's on board, and so the king is going to come back across the Jordan and go up to Jerusalem to reoccupy. Verse 15, and so the king returned and came to Jordan. Yes,
I'm confused about. I shouldn't be confused, but which one is Israel? So this is called Judah, and the other 10 are called Israel.
Yeah, that's the way. At least the way I'm just following the text. Okay, is what it's saying.
Thank you.
Okay, and now remember, Israel, though most of Israel were the ones had just gone and fought for David in his behalf. Judah was reluctant. Judah was the one dragging their feet. So this is why David's appealing to them. Look, we're the same tribe. Of all, you should be the ones should be loyal to me. And so they were persuaded in this. Israel kind of like, well, we followed Absalom. We set up, we put him in power, but David beat him, so we better knuckle down and follow David. They were basically convinced by David's might. And so as they're going across, they go to Gilgal. Now Gilgal is a significant place. There's lots of historical things that took place at Gilgal. I could go into that. In fact, maybe I should. But this is an area that has, historically, it has some real significance. I'll just try to mention a couple if I can get my little notes up here.
Chuck, before we leave on, can you make any comment about why Judah was hesitant?
Why Judah was hesitant?
Yeah.
That's from the previous chapter we
Like a sentence or something. Well,
I think that there could be a lot of reasons, but I think it was partly because of David's. David had done something very wrong, and there, as I said last week, there are some very principled people that are doing things that they think are the right thing. I'm not sure what their reason was, but that would be part of what my guess would be. Somebody else want to answer that? Anybody else? Nobody? Okay, so let's see. I'm trying to catch where I am here. Verse 15 is where I'm at. Okay, here we go. So Gilgal is it was a place where Abraham. Let's see. It was the place of. From the solemn transaction of the reading of the law in the valley of Shechem, between Ebal and Gerizim, the Israelites moved forward to Gilgal, and they made a permanent camp there. So even from the time of Abraham, this goes back, and he erected an altar in Genesis 12 in this place. This is one of the 3 towns which Samuel resorted to for the administration of justice. And this is where later all Israel gathered to renew their allegiance to Saul. So you can see the historical significance of this place, Gilgal. So they're assembling here. I'll leave it at that. And go to meet, and Judah came to Gilgal to go to meet the king, to conduct the king over to the Jordan. And Shimei, the son of Gera, a Benjamite, So now we've got Judah and Benjamin in play here, which was of Bahurim, hasted and came down with the men of Judah to meet King David. Now, Shimei was this guy that when David was leaving Jerusalem was the one kicking up dust and throwing stones at him and hollering and making a big commotion. This was an Eastern practice that you did to a king who's losing, or a someone in power who has just lost. This is how you show they are disgraced. That's what that means. That's what that's about. And Bob told us a little bit about that last time. So now he's coming with his hat in his hand, and he says, he hasted and came down to the men of Judah to meet King David. He had 1,000 Benjamites with him too. And there were 1,000 men of Benjamin with him, and Ziba, the servant of the house of Saul. Well, how do we remember Ziba? He was the one who's the servant of who? Mephibosheth, right? So all these people we've talked about before in the past, it's important to try to remember, because what Samuel is doing is giving us the aftermath, the what happened afterwards. When we read about them before, they seemed at the time like kind of little incidental events, but now we're starting to see the closing of the open loops that were created in the story. Ziba's the servant of the house of Saul, and his 15 sons and his 20 servants were with him, and they went over Jordan before the king. What does that mean? In front of the king, right? Preceding the king. And there went over a ferry boat. Did you know there were ferry boats back then? Ferry boat to carry over the king's household and to do what he thought good. And Shimei, the son of Gera, fell down before the king, and as he was come over Jordan, and said unto the king, Let not my lord impute iniquity unto me, neither do thou remember that which thy servant did perversely the day that my lord the king went out of Jerusalem, that the king should take it to his heart. For thy servant doth know that I have sinned. Therefore, behold, I am come the first this day of all the house of Joseph to go down to meet my lord the king. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, answered and said, Shall not Shimei be put to death for this, because he cursed the Lord's anointed? Remember at the time David said, leave him alone. God's probably told him to curse me. I deserve it. He was very lenient with him. But this advice that is put him to death, he was against you. And David said, What have I to do with you, ye sons of Zeruiah, that ye should this day be adversaries unto me? Shall there any man be put to death this day in Israel? For do not I know that I am this day king over Israel? Now, that's a loaded sentence right there. Do I not know that I am this day king over Israel? Is actually a question that is very much in jeopardy. He thinks everything's fine. He does not see the undercurrent that's going on, as we shall see. Therefore the king said unto Shimei, Thou shalt not die. Now, Dave correctly points out later on, David will give instructions to Solomon, his son, to actually take care of him. David's not going to do it personally. And it's done in a very crafty way. I'll just tell you really quick. Shimei is basically put under, we'll just call it house arrest. He's not to pass over the brook Kidron. He's not to leave the area. If he does, he's going to die. And just to give you a little bit of insight, if you want to look at this yourself when you get some spare time, Shimei seems to be a person who's really I wish I could think of the right word. He's the kind of person that if he sees something to go to pick on, he's gonna go after it. Okay,
that's a strength.
Kind of like a Pharisee, you know. I mean, he is gonna go after it. If it's wrong, he's gonna go after it. He doesn't seem to be the merciful type. He wants mercy from David. He's begging for it here, but he doesn't seem to be willing to easily give it, okay? Because when a couple of his servants leave and he's told that they're gone, he gets on his mule and takes off to Gath to go get him, crosses over the brook, and in doing so signs his death warrant. He's more concerned about getting those two servants back than he is about his own life. He thinks he's going to skate through there, but it doesn't work out well for him. So that's what happens to him later on. You'll see that in Kings if you want to read that. Therefore the king said unto Shimei, Thou shalt not die. And the king sware unto him. And Mephibosheth, the son of Saul, came down to meet the king, and had neither dressed his feet, nor trimmed his beard, nor washed his clothes. Whew, he must have smelled. From the day the king departed until the day he came again in peace. Which I'm not sure how much time that was, but he probably stinked. And it came to pass when he was come to Jerusalem to meet the king. Now remember, Ziba's already had his say with the king, right? That the king said unto him, Wherefore wentest thou not with me, Mephibosheth? And he answered, My lord, O king, my servant deceived me. Remember this story before? When the servant left and brought David this stuff and told him the story? Well, now we're getting... I think we came back and looked at this at the time. Oh, my servant deceived me, for thy servant said, I will saddle me an ass, that I may ride thereon and go to the king, because thy servant is lame. And he has slandered thy servant unto my lord the king. But my lord the king is an angel of God. Do therefore what is good in thine eyes. For all of my father's house were but dead men before my lord the king. Yet didst thou set thy servant among them that did eat at thine own table. What right, therefore, have I yet to cry any more unto the king? Now this is interesting. Here's Mephibosheth in a position to make an appeal to get everything back that he had coming to him. Remember, David had already basically given the land to Ziba, said, well, okay, you guys, you can have it if Mephibosheth has truly done this. David's asking for an accounting here. Here's the story. I'm sure David's about fed up with it. He's just trying to get back into his home, and he doesn't really... I almost feel like he doesn't want to have to deal with this small stuff. I believe... Tell me what you think about this. I believe this is the very kind of thing that when Solomon prayed for wisdom, Solomon can see what's going on. Solomon's a young man growing up, and he's seeing what's going on and the troubles of dealing with people. This is the very kind of thing that I think Solomon prayed for wisdom in knowing how to deal with. And so the king says, Why speakest thou any more of thy matters? I have said thou and Ziba divide the land. And Mephibosheth said unto the king, Yea, let him take all, for as much as my lord the king is come again in peace unto his own house. Basically, Mephibosheth's attitude is, you know what, I don't even care about that. I'm just glad to have you back. And that's a nice thing, isn't it, Bob?
But the attitude that I have here is largely in part because when Saul was killed and everything, and David looked and he said, Is there any one from the house of Saul that yet lived? And they said, the guy which has lame feet. And he immediately took care of him.
Right.
So he remembers that.
Right.
And he could have easily have been slain at that same time because he was Saul's, household.
That's
he
right.
could have been killed like the rest of them, but David did not.
Right.
And so I think here he remembers that. And
Right.
he said, I don't need land and stuff to spare my life. You show me mercy. I've set at your table to eat, and you're taking care of me. So I'm just happy you're back in charge.
Right. Now, what tribe was Saul from? Benjamin. Right. Okay, so we know that. So what do you not see Judah and Benjamin making very strong, trying to make a very strong alliance with David this time? Well, Israel is the one that has gone and basically done, showed the initiative in fighting for David. The other tribes, how do you think they're feeling right now? They see themselves as the loyal ones. And now Judah's coming in making a strong case for themselves. Buddying right up. We're blood, we're good, we're locking in. They actually start proceeding across the river without the other tribes. This is a point which I will say this. It's so important when you're the leader to not show preference, to make sure everybody that matters is on board. Because David didn't do that here, and it's going to come to haunt him and the continued history of the 12 tribes. So it came to pass when he was come to Jerusalem to meet the king. Oh wait, I'm backing up here. Where am I at? Okay, so about verse 31. And Barzillai the Gileadite came down from Rogelim and went over Jordan with the king to conduct him over Jordan. Now Barzillai was a very aged man, even 80 years old, and he had provided the king of sustenance while he lay at Mahanaim, for he was a very great man. So this is a guy, an old man, wealthy, that was basically a supply source for David while he was out here fighting. Well, David wants to reward him. And so the king said unto Barzillai, Come thou over with me, and I will feed thee with me in Jerusalem. And Barzillai said unto the king. Now again, a good example of a man not asking for anything in return for the work that he had done, just wants to live his life out. Barzillai said unto the king, How long have I to live, that I should go up with the king unto Jerusalem? I am this day 80 years old, and can I discern between good and evil? Can thy servant taste what I eat or what I drink? Because I'm so old I can't even taste anything anymore. Can I hear any more the voice of singing men and singing women? Wherefore then should thy servant yet be a burden unto my lord the king? Thy servant will go a little way over Jordan with the king. I think he's doing this as part of the procession. He wants to be part of the procession. He just doesn't want to stay there. And why should the king recompense me with such a reward? That is to compensate. Let thy servant, I pray thee, turn back again, that I may die in mine own city, and be buried by the grave of my father and of my mother. But behold, thy servant Chimham, let him go over with my lord the king, and do to him what shall seem good unto thee. And the king answered, Chimham shall go over with me, and I will do to him that which shall seem good unto thee. And whatsoever thou shalt require of me, that will I do for thee. And I think I looked that up. I believe that was possibly a son of his. But what's fun about that is if you look, I believe it's either I think it's Jeremiah. His name comes up again as one having, or it was a place called after Chimham that was an inn where somebody stays in the book of Jeremiah. So apparently when he goes, this Chimham, he establishes some kind of an inn where people stay. I just thought that was interesting, a place of hospitality. Verse 39, and all the people went over Jordan, and when the king was come over, the king kissed Barzillai and blessed him, and he returned unto his own place. So here's a very grateful old man who was a service to David, didn't ask for anything else, actually gave the blessing to someone younger than him to appreciate and to enjoy. Verse 40, then the king went on to Gilgal, and Chimham went on with him, and all the people of Judah conducted the king, and also half the people of Israel. So there were some of Israel, but not everybody was. Verse 41, and behold, all the men of Israel came to the king and said unto the king, Why have our brethren, the men of Judah, stolen thee away, and have brought the king and his household and all David's men with him over Jordan? And all the men of Judah answered the men of Israel, Because the king is near of kin of us. Wherefore then be ye angry for this matter? Have we eaten at all the king's cost? Or hath he given us any gift? And the men of Israel answered the men of Judah and said, We have 10 parts in the king. 10. What's the 10 parts? That's right. 10 brothers, right? And we have also more right in David than ye. Why then did ye despise us, that our advice should not be first? that should not be first had in bringing back our king. Then we have this statement. I want you to tell me what you think it means. And the words of the men of Judah were fiercer than the words of the men of Israel.
They were stronger in the argument than the men of Israel.
I think we have a war of words here. There's a book called War of Words, a very good book if you ever get a chance to read in it, and I'm trying to learn from it. The War of Words. So, what's going to happen in chapter 20, after we'll talk about this for a minute, we'll get there, but what's getting ready to happen is we're going to get ready to have an uprising that started with this War of Words. Any comments so far?
It'd been nice if there had been a mediator right then that could have helped them resolve that right at that moment. So the 10 tribes, they made some assumptions, and the nicest somebody could have said, no, that's not really true. You're perceiving it wrong. That could have helped a lot.
Yeah.
The missing mediator.
Yeah. There's always going to be people that are going to be jealous. They're going to feel like they're left out. They're going to feel like favoritism's going on. Leaders have to be so careful, Bob.
But it also reiterates again that words matter.
Words matter.
They really matter. I mean,
Thank you for saying that, because that's what I think. I think that I feel like what's the Lord trying to tell us here in these passages? Why does He go through the trouble to relay all these little details? The blessing of the old man, the satisfaction of Mephibosheth. I'm just glad you're back. I don't care about the land. Words.
the matter we should be, it's like, it's kind of teaching us a lesson that we need to be content with all we have. You said over in the New Testament, if you have food and raiment, then you should just be content. The words that he spoke mattered. And sometimes I think we're, as humans, we're prone to forget. We know that as Christians, but we forget that we're a temple of the Holy Spirit. And wherever we go, whatever we say, whatever we think, He's right there. Mm-hmm. So it matters not just to you and whoever you're speaking, but it matters that your words should be pleasing to the Lord.
Tell you what, it's very convicting to me. I'll be honest with you. I am more and more aware how we like to use our words as weapons instead of as a balm. Pastor.
I think it's interesting how that Mephibosheth and the utter wisdom of David, from the standpoint, if what Mephibosheth said was fully true, then Ziba should have not gotten anything.
Right.
But I think that the thing is in wisdom, if Mephibosheth really meant that, I mean, I would get a pair of crutches and start heading toward David, or I would take what property I had and I would buy a mule and I would get on that mule and I'd head toward David as well. And so, though he may have been in mourning, maybe instead of confusion, I think that the wisdom of David was spectacular and said, okay, I'm going to divide the land, you get half and you get half.
Right. Reminds me of what Solomon did.
Yeah.
Solomon did later with the child, the same, offered to divide it in half.
And the same way with Barzillai, he knew his life was ended, and here again, a man of integrity wanted the best for his family in this area.
Right.
So the blessing passed down.
Yes.
I'd like to.
And then you can go.
First, Proverbs has so many verses about our time, but I was thinking about Proverbs 18:21. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. But it's just amazing how many verses in Proverbs, like over half these chapters, or over half the verses in some of these chapters are just one after another. But that, it matters what you say. Like Bob said.
Yes, I just like, can't pronounce his name, but I'm just going to say the elder man here. I like his spirit. He wasn't selfish. He didn't want to be a burden to David, so he said, why should I go with you? This is reality. This is real life. This is the way we ought to be. I take this from hands-on experience. I remember this lady had a granddaughter. She was very young. She was up in age. And the granddaughter loved her so much she tried her best to aid her. But the mother, the grandmother said, I don't want you to be burdened with me. You go and live your own young life. So this gentleman, he didn't want to burden David because at his age, somewhere along the line, he probably would have been a burden. So that's a wonderful spirit, I think, here.
Drew, you have any comments?
Yeah, I was just thinking in the last couple of verses there where, they're kind of arguing back and forth. Just like some of the wording used, and it seems like their arguments are almost childish, very petty, like, oh, well, we're related. And the other one's like, well, we have 10 parts of David, you only have 2. It seems very petty. But, looking at it, I think, you had mentioned from the same point on the leader, the way you view people, you can't show deference to them. And I think that's true. And I think, another...
Preference, not deference.
Preference, yeah, sorry.
Preference.
I think another aspect of that is, recognizing people's achievements, which, like you had mentioned, David didn't really do as much for the Israel, people of Israel. And a lot of times maybe those who are in a leadership position, we can look at, the words or the arguments of people under us, and they seem very petty, very small. Like, why are you arguing about this? But maybe to those people, those things they're talking about are important, very important to them. And if we as leaders don't recognize that, then that's where division is caused.
Yeah.
I think it's important to recognize the concerns and also the achievements of those who are under us.
Good, very good. Good advice. Anybody else? Fred?
Yes, perhaps we could say that the people of Israel have not learned the principle of just being thankful in all circumstances. As has been said, pride is riding high there, and it would be good to remember that this life is not fair. And thinking here of Barzillai, as at least I see this, and I assume many other older people might as well, but as we get older, we hopefully appreciate the simple things of life. Perhaps he just wants to stay around what's familiar to him, his loved ones, and the things of this life, and the throne in Jerusalem. It doesn't matter. Let it go. So I see wisdom in his comments there, of course.
Good. Thank you, John.
Reminds me, where there's envy and strife, there's confusion in every evil work.
Yes.
That's what's taking place right now.
Yeah.
What's that again, Pastor?
I said, where there's envy and strife, there is confusion in every evil work. New Testament.
Yeah. Dave, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I said this before. I wonder what y'all think about this. Is that it just seems like nobody's talking to God, nobody's asking God, nobody's worshiping God. They're just on their own level, You don't see any record of David or anybody or either side saying, okay, God, what do you want us to do now? Where do we have a mess. Where should we go? But they just left God out for chapters and chapters and chapters. And so the reason why they are going to have a big problem is, I'd like to know what y'all think, but they've left God out. It's all about them now. What do y'all think about that? Maybe it's happening behind the scenes and I just don't see it.
Well, David said that he had left things in the hands of the Lord when he left. Even when Shimei was cursing, he said, perhaps this is what God wants. And so I think that David was surrendered to whatever punishment or results God had in mind. And you see that later when he numbers the people. And he's given choices that he chooses to put himself under the hand of God's judgment rather than the judgment of men. And yet thousands of lives even for that were lost.
Right.
And David's case kind of saying what Pastor said, he already put things in the Lord's hands. And so there really wasn't a need at this point for him to go back to the Lord about the same thing. That's what we do sometimes. The Lord, we'll pray for the Lord to give us an answer. If not the answer we want. So what do? We come back to the Lord again. And we already have the answer. David already knew, he wasn't digging into his past and all the things that happened. So, I think he was just, I don't think it was that he wasn't, didn't have God in mind. I think he was just resting and probably knew that was God's will. And that's what God wants us to do sometimes.
Amen.
He wants us to rest in his will. He says, come to me, either pardon you, and I will give you rest. So sometimes we just need to rest when we know
Yeah,
what God wants.
let me piggyback on that just a tiny bit. David has clearly said, I now know I'm the king. I think that that's a significant statement in the sense that he now has clarity that God wants him to still be the king, to your point earlier about when he was leaving it to the Lord. Now he's got his answer. But once you get the answer, when we leaders get the answer from God, we still cannot forget about bringing the people along in a wise way, I guess is the best way to say it. We can't just go running ahead without being, as you said, being careful that the concerns of people that will be following you and supporting you, that their needs are being met. Yes, they were petty, and yes, they're not being particularly smart about how they're handling this. They are striving.
So you're saying David should have been that mediator?
I'm saying that it's not an either or. There's work to be done on both sides here. And I'm just saying that we should be, just because we get the go-ahead to go do our thing that God wants us to do, we can't run. We need to bring our support with us, and make sure that everybody's... I just think leaders sometimes just assume people are just automatically going to follow, when they're given the marching orders. And sometimes people need a little bit more, clarity on what is exactly we getting ready to do now.
So would you say David was out of touch a little bit, and he should have been more of a mediator? He should have reconciled it right there.
I'm just asking the question, posing the possibility.
Well, this is a total state of confusion because remember these people got behind Absalom. Mm-hmm. They also still knew that David was still a warrior king. Mm-hmm. And I think that they had known what he had done, as we had discussed before, all the lands and everything that he had done to subdue the lands that were promised to Israel. Mm-hmm. And no one else did that before him. And so now, potentially because of embarrassment of the fact that here, what is he going to do to us? We better get behind this guy because we know what has happened to all the nations that he has basically destroyed. And even Israel, when he went against Israel, rose up against him. Mm-hmm. God took many, many lives of those villages, even of the nation of Israel.
Well, what I'm just going to suggest, and you can be looking forward for next week. We'll have a shorter session next week. I think so we have Man of the Word next week. I believe the 20th. Is that next week?
Yes.
So it'll be a tiny bit shorter. So I'd like you to study ahead a little bit, Fred.
Yeah, to piggyback on that comment, the folks, why did the tribes follow Absalom? Was not a big reason, because he promised to meet their needs, to meet their needs better than
Yes.
David was. If you come to me, I'll listen to what you have to say. And so I'm prompted to piggyback on
Very
your
good point.
comment there, that a good leader is sensitive to the needs of the people, even those that are fleshly and prideful. That's human nature. And good leaders have got to realize that's where people are at, by and large.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good point.
That's a good comment.
And as Jacques Cousteau said, men are born free, but are in chains everywhere. And so we are dealing with, if you're married, you married a sinner, and your wife married a sinner.
Yeah.
And so we are dealing with sinners. Good leaders can deal with sinners as well as those that are not carnally minded.
Well said. Let me make one little comment here. Have you ever, I'll ask a question, have you ever done the right thing, at least in your mind you did the right thing, and then somebody basically steps in and tries to undermine your good thing, and now you're tempted to be offended by that you weren't treated well in doing the right thing? When we get into chapter 20, you'll notice that it introduces a man named Sheba, and it says he was a man of Belial. Belial, however you say that. This word Belial, it's interesting if you look it up. It has more to do with an attitude than it does. It's not, I don't believe it's an actual place. If it is, it's still tied to more to the attitude. It's an attitude of weakness and of
Worthless.
Worthlessness.
That's what it literally
yes, it
means,
means
worthless.
worthless. Thank you. And so this worthless name that is tied to the name of Sheba is going to blow this trumpet and call to the people and say, neither have we. Said he blew a trumpet and said, we have no part in David, neither have we inheritance in the son of Jesse. Every man to his tents, O Israel. This is a battle cry. And he has been, for whatever reason, offended. I believe I think he's been offended by this, what happened in the harsh words of Judah, the not being brought along and into the conversation by David. I think this is all part of this. So he's going to head up an insurrection here. And so I want you to look and see where that takes things. Okay? All is not well in the camp. Thank you for coming, and thank you for bringing on a good discussion. You got a song?
Yeah, turn to page 517. 517. Resolve. 517. I'm resolved no longer to linger. I am resolved no longer to linger, charged